Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the GSoC 2022 introduction from the Palisadoes Foundation. And my name is Peter Harrison. You will probably see me a lot on the channels as well as on the GitHub activity lists on all three repos as well as Talawa docs. So my username on GitHub is Palisadoes, as many of you know. If you're going to try to get in contact with me related to issues, please, as much as possible, just ask the question directly in the issues. One of our other mentors will be responding to you as quickly as we can. I have a number of activities that I have to work on from time to time. And as a result of that, I may not be able to meet all your requirements, okay? So please be patient with that. I think many of you will understand. All right, so once again. All right, so let's go to the very next page of the presentation. What is the Google Summer of Code? These are things that you all know already. It's a global program. There are student, and sometimes this year there's going to be professional developers. We're going to have open source projects, and there's summer projects. Some of them go all the way to autumn or fall. Students get mentors on the completion of milestones. There's a payment. The aim of Google Summer of Code is to promote collaboration, to give practical and relevant experience and provide very, very visible GitHub contributions. So I wanted to talk about the Palisadoes Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization. It's a Jamaican diaspora-led organization. So the primary directorship are Jamaicans living in the United States. And we started the foundation to try and promote technology on the island. We have a software education focus. Many of our volunteers are IT professionals in Jamaica, and as well, we have volunteers in India at the moment as well. And we have both local sponsors as well as sponsors in the United States, and we are a Google Summer of Code participant. And when we started out in the beginning, we wanted to find out exactly what students wanted, and they wanted industry involvement, collaboration experience, practical experience as well. They wanted to hone in on in-demand skills and have visible contributions. But most importantly, they wanted to have professional recognition. And so we started a program called the Calico Challenge. It was based on the Google Summer of Code, but instead of Google providing sponsorship, we got sponsorship from local Jamaican companies. And we created our own open source projects. And after a number of years of trial and error, we came up with the Talawa Project. And we've had success since 2016, and we've been trying as much as possible to expand that to get contributions from around the world. So let's go on to the next page. And so these are some of the sponsors from Jamaica, but I know many of you are not so much interested in Jamaica. You are mostly interested in trying to understand how to get into the Google Summer of Code. But I wanted to give all of you some background as to what we're trying to do. You may see references to the Calico Challenge in some of our correspondence. Please keep this in mind. Thank you. All right, so let's continue. So we wanted to find out what the next steps would be for the Palisadoes Foundation, and we decided as a group that we wanted to have a global reach, projects for developing regions in general, to have a community development focus, and then to have the projects earning an income. So one of the things that we're trying to do eventually is to make our projects earn an income through some sort of a cloud service, which is why when you look at the Google Summer of Code ideas list, you may see things related to the launching of a cloud service. What we want to do is to try and see how we can launch a cloud service, and the income that we get from that service would be plowed back into our programs as a nonprofit organization. Many nonprofit organizations rely on two sources of income. The primary source would be donations from companies such as Google and the local Jamaican companies, but also from earning income. And in many cases, they earn income from providing services to other nonprofit organizations. There are a number of organizations that work on this particular model. There is the Mozilla Foundation, which has a Mozilla for-profit organization that reports into the Mozilla nonprofit for the open source projects that they have. And WordPress does something similar with their WordPress.org operation as well as their WordPress.com operation. So there's a precedence in this in the open source community, and we would like to see how we can emulate that for the Palisadoes Foundation. So let's talk about the Talawa mobile app. It's a community group management app. It's primarily aimed at organizations that are created to help neighborhoods, to help cities, villages, whatever it may be, organize themselves for some common goal to help the membership or the population of those areas. So these include clubs, neighborhood groups, volunteer organizations, nonprofits, small religious institutions, you name it. Anything that's in that general realm would be something that we're trying to make work. And so many of the features, many of the requests and bugs and things that and in terms of the way that we think, are really trying to think of, will this work for a nonprofit organization with a relatively unsophisticated IT department? Or maybe the IT department is one of the volunteers of the organization themselves. So when you're creating your ideas, when you are thinking about what needs to be done, please keep this in mind. This is very, very important. I always ask those questions. The mentors are going to ask those questions. And so before you even start, make sure that this is a part of your consideration set. So what are the goals for Talawa 2022? Well, of course, the first goal is for us to be in Google Summer of Code 2023. And we want to launch a cloud service if it's at all possible. We think we're almost there. We want to see how we can have multi-organization hosting in that cloud service, if it's possible. So therefore, some way of either sharding the information that we have across organizations, or maybe having multiple instances of the Talawa API that the mobile app would talk to. And so keep those things in mind when you are creating your ideas. And most importantly, probably for us, is stability and the need for automated testing. And the reason for this is because I will be very open and honest about this. The Talawa mobile app was extremely buggy last year when we started the Google Summer of Code. And one of the things that we have been trying to do as much as possible is to make it as stable and reliable as we can. And so the noticeable difference between this year in Google Summer of Code and last year is that there are relatively few bugs that people are finding because the code has been tested a little better, because we have the automation, because we have the linting, because we have all these things. And so when you are making your proposals, when you are doing pull requests, make sure that as much as possible you have automated testing as a part of the pull request or the proposal that you have. This is really important. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing stability in anything that we're doing in terms of having new types of features. So I want to make sure that's very clear to a number of you that are on the call. So we have a number of potential ideas. One of the things that we want to do, for those of you who are not familiar with how Talawa operates, is that we have a mobile app which runs on Flutter, on iOS and or Android. It communicates to a central API which is run on a separate code base, the Talawa API code base. And that API runs on Node.js, JavaScript libraries, and MongoDB on the back end. The interaction with the mobile app is using GraphQL. Now, we recognize that GraphQL may not be suitable in all cases. We have some situations at the moment where we are trying to create chat for the mobile app. There's some guys working on that right now. And we've been thinking about ways in which we could have subscriptions as an alternative. So that could be something that people may want to consider implementing for this year. So that's one possible idea. And then we have an admin repository, which is a web app, which interacts with the API as well. The web app runs on TypeScript, and we have been working on that quite a lot over the last year. Hang on a second. So we want to make sure that there's ways in which the admin portal, the web portal, can support plugins. Now, why would we want to have plugins? There are many reasons for this. So, for example, if we wanted to have a situation where the nonprofit organization would want to accept donations for whatever it may be a temple, for example, and they may have monthly donations from the membership, and there could also be a need for accepting income from advertising on the news feed, in some of the chats, etc. And the methodology, the plugin that would be used, we would probably want that to be customizable in some way. Now, there are many different ways in which that could be customizable. One of them is in making sure that there are different types of payment processing type applications that could be used. So we may want to, I know that, for example, in some jurisdictions there may be Razorpay. In others there could be PayPal. There may be plugins that would do both of those things. And we don't want to be tied into using a single plugin for accepting or handling of payment processing. And so that's very important for us to consider. There may be different types of advertising plugins that could be used. There could be a plugin that could do Google AdWords, for example, or it could be a plugin that could be very, very simple, that accepts MP4s or MP3s or just JPEGs, PNGs from local companies and then randomly intersperses them in the feeds of people. Something very, very simple. So remember when I was talking about the fact that there could be organizations that are not very sophisticated. So one methodology that I mentioned before would be for the less sophisticated organizations. Another one would be for the more sophisticated organizations, as you can imagine. We've spoken about multi-tenant access as well. So we want to think of different ways in which we could have that as possible ideas. We want to have event and venue management. So it's not just having the calendar and having recurring calendar events. Many of these organizations may have a meeting room, they may have a hall, they may have a cricket pitch, a soccer field, all those things that they may want to tie to various types of events. And they may want to see how, if that particular resource, the field or the hall or the room is taken already for some other activity. Just like you have a meeting room in many larger organizations, these organizations also want to have that. So event and venue management are important. Things like check-ins are important. So for example, events, people may want to have ways in which they can register for the event. And when they arrive, there could probably be a simple way for people to check in to see that they've actually arrived. One of the things that comes to mind would be an event that somebody could create in which there could be childcare at one of these organizations. And as a result of that, there may need to be check-ins of the children when they arrive as well. So it's always good to have this sort of information. If a venue has a maximum capacity of people inside of it, check-ins are also important. So these are the types of things that we're trying to create when we are talking about event venue management. And I'm sure many of you would have other types of things that you would want to consider. We want to have chat, as I mentioned before, but we want to have it very scalable. We want it to be able to handle things like the uploading of objects. We want to make sure that there's features such as deduplication. and trying to find ways in which the organizations themselves won't have to be paying for duplicated data in their storage systems, whether the storage system be local or whether the storage system would be in a cloud. So that's really important. So, for example, what are we talking about in terms of deduplication? If somebody uploads an image and then forwards it to somebody else, we don't want that image to be copied in the stream of the other person. We want to have a single ID for that particular image. And when it is forwarded or replied, etc., that is the only image that is there. And then when the image is deleted, we don't want in somebody's stream, or that chat is deleted, or that event is deleted, we don't want that image to be deleted immediately until everybody who's ever received that image has deleted it as well. So those are the types of things that we want to think about when we are working with object management. And so we have some ideas related to that. These are just some of the ideas or the consequences of your actions. If you're going to be making a presentation or having some sort of a proposal, do some research, make sure that you understand what the challenges are, and then don't just say that you're going to do deduplication. Explain how you're going to be doing it. What are the libraries you're going to use? What are the strategies you're going to be using? We have many people that essentially copy and paste the ideas list into their presentations and expect that to be good enough. That will not be good enough. We want to know how. We want to know why you came up with the particular proposal. We want to know what are the competing technologies and techniques that you considered and why you want to use the one that you're proposing above all the others. This is very important. If you're going to be working in an organization, these are the types of things you're going to have to consider. And so we want to make sure that this is the case as well. We want to make sure that if we're accepting a proposal, that people will definitely have something that is usable and also testable, as I mentioned before. And so there are many other things. There's social media reminders. So, for example, if somebody receives a notification, do we want the notification to come in when they're sleeping, when they're away, when they're all of those sorts of things? So those are the types of ideas and suggestions that we want to take into consideration. So I hope that provides some clarity. So what do we need? We definitely need the best students globally. And we really try to think about this in a very deliberate and considered way. And it's not just the brightest people that we want. And so because of this, we ask the question, the best how? What exactly do we mean by the best? And so we want people that have good ideas. They need to have meaningful pull requests. We have had situations in the past where people submit a pull request for typos in our error messages, for typos in our markdown, people changing colors from FFFFFF to FD, and trying to say that that's a great improvement from white to almost white in our backgrounds. People have changed the radius of the corners of edges of various types of dialog boxes. Those are not meaningful pull requests, and you know it. And we go through those and we say, we use that information as part of our evaluation for pull requests. And pull requests for us are very important. If you have not made any pull requests, you will probably not make it past the first round. We are looking for people who have made the effort. Many of you may feel that you have the potential, they feel passionate about the activities that you're trying to achieve, but unless you have a meaningful pull request, even if it's just one, we won't be able to evaluate your abilities to understand the code, the challenges, and therefore that is very important for us to take into consideration. We are also looking for people that are self-motivated and therefore need light supervision. And because they require light supervision, there are some things that automatically flow from that. They need to be reliable, which is an automatic consequence of light supervision. They need to have knowledge of the frameworks, which will come from the meaningful pull request that we mentioned before. And the code needs to be testable. We have a number of good first issues in each of the various repositories. They have been created over the last number of months, specifically to try and get our code base more reliable, but also to give people the opportunity to understand how the code base works in the first place. In Talawa, there are tests for widgets, there are tests for view models, and there are tests for views. If any of you are looking for tests to do at the moment, in Talawa specifically, I would suggest that you start with the view models if you are an intermediate in your knowledge of Flutter. And the reason for that is because a lot of the stability comes from the interpretation of the data through the view models. So that's going to be important. There are a number of widgets tests that some of the newer participants in Flutter would want to take a look at. So I would also suggest that you take a look at those. And of course, there are some of the views as well. But the widgets and the view models would be good for beginner and intermediates, and I think that would be very helpful. For the Talawa API, we have testing for a number of the resolvers that are there. So please take a look at those. Talawa API at the moment only has 10% code coverage. We need to get that up. The code coverage in terms of testing for Talawa is now close to 60%. It was 30% at the beginning of the year, and it's been slowly increasing. So the code is really getting more stable, and we really want you, as a part of your pull request, to take into consideration testing as something to work with. And the documentation needs to be excellent in terms of the proposals that you do, and also in the code that you write. Take pride in what you're doing. Write comments in your functions, classes, methods, etc., so that other people can know what's going on. So state what this function does. If there are arguments, state what those arguments are, just so that other people, not just yourself, have an idea. We don't want somebody to be doing forensics first in order to try and understand what the code base is about. If you can provide help, just like when you are using your IDEs for Flutter, you can, I think it's a Control Q, and then you can do some other things like F4 in Android Studio, and you can see the actual source code, and you can see that it's very well documented. We would like to try and see how we can get there. And as a result of that, we are working on a number of CI/CD integrations that will pull the comments from your code base and then put that into the Talawa Docs website as well. So expect us slowly to be asking for better and better documentation in the code that you provide. Okay. So beyond Google Summer of Code, there are academic coursework recommendations that we will provide, and this is going to be based on meaningful, consistent contributions to the projects. And we've done this a number of times. We have done this for students in the Google Summer of Code. We have done this for students in the Calico Challenge, which is the Jamaican equivalent. And you can work with your mentors. They're probably the best people to provide the feedback for some of these sorts of recommendations. Many people ask me directly, but and quite often what happens is that because I don't work with many of you directly, I'm not in a good position to do that. And so please work with your mentors when some of these things are happening. That would be really, really great. All right, so what are the strategies for success? Visit the GitHub projects, visit our project website, fork the repos, review the issues, contact the mentors. The names of primary mentors are on our ideas list, so you can contact them directly on our Slack channel. If you're not familiar with using Slack, please create an account and go to slack.palisadoes.org, and you will be able to get information from the various subfeeds that are there as well. Sorry. So use those channels to build rapport, work on features, and of course apply. So that's it. If you're interested in learning more about the Google Summer of Code for Palisadoes, just go to palisadoes.org/GSoC, and it'll go to these pages. So let me show you what pages those are going to be. Right, so let's take a look at one of our GitHub repositories. So let's take a look at Talawa, for example. And if you scroll across to here, you'll see this link that says the Palisadoes Foundation.github.io. And when you click on that link, you get to our documentation page, and then you can click on Docs. And there's a number of pieces of information that you can use to get here. There's information on our internships. Then there's links onto GSoC that you can see. And then there's introductions, applying, etc. There's an overview page as well that you can take a look at. And so we can see from here, there's an introduction, which is the primary page on the Google Summer of Code page when you click on it. And it talks about things that you should be doing to get familiar with what we are about. There's information on deciding whether you're eligible for GSoC. We have a GSoC Google GSoC presentation. We have this presentation that is there as well. And of course, we have links to our various ideas lists, etc. And then we have links to the various issues that are in each of the repositories. And there's also a link here under GSoC. If you take a look here, there's a link to applying, which is on this tab, and it outlines all the things that you should be doing. So there's a draft submissions at palisadoes.org that you can use, or you can try and get in contact with the mentors directly. The mentors may refer you to another mentor because they may be bombarded by dozens and dozens of you sending emails to them. So take that into consideration. We're going to be updating the mailing list that we have here, which is the draft submissions and the mentors at palisadoes.org, so that everybody can see it. But feel free to get in contact with the mentors directly and understand that they may be busy. And if they're busy, just ask them, is there somebody else who's a mentor who can also help? And please take this into consideration. Many of the mentors that are on our lists are working and have very demanding jobs in a number of organizations, both in Jamaica, India, and the United States. And so therefore, please take that into consideration. We have 3 or 4 mentors based in India at the moment. Most of the rest of the mentors are based in Jamaica. Take that into consideration. Work with the Indian-based mentors sometimes, and then you can also work with some of the Jamaican-based mentors depending on the time of day. So if it's like, so for example, if you're working on something in India and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you want to get in contact with a mentor, try getting in contact with a mentor in Jamaica, and vice versa. If you're in Jamaica and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, try to get in contact with a mentor in India. We more or less have follow the sun coverage for mentorship at the moment, which is really, really good. We did not have that last year. And so that is something that you can take into consideration. All right, so I want to talk about the application template. We really try to ask you to include a GitHub profile avatar icon in your application, and also to have a GitHub icon or avatar in your profile. It really helps us to identify who is who, and it makes the identification of people saying, "Oh, I remember that avatar. That was with those pull requests. Yeah, we did some stuff there." That helps a lot in some of the evaluations that we're doing. It just makes it easier for us when we're starting to do searches or trying to refer things in the back of our minds. And so we have ideas as to what the templates are and the major headings that you should have. So please take that into consideration. That is really going to be important. And we also have a page on the selection criteria. And of course, we are talking about previous contributions to Talawa, the quality of issues. So these are things, I'm not going to read all of these things here, but they're on the Talawa webpage, and they are really insightful as well. All right, last but not least, the ideas list. So on our ideas list, we have links to all of these things. So if you just go to the ideas list, there's links to the introductions, the selection criteria, and application templates. So you can just go to this one page and get a little bit of everything. We talk about testing. We talk about the various repositories and the languages that they are having. And so another thing we are working on or having our ideas is the impact definition. We have low-hanging fruit, risky, exploratory. And so when you're looking at the information, you can get a fairly good idea as to what things are like in terms of the types of projects and the levels of difficulty. And one of the things that I also want to talk about, and it's one of these pages, I don't remember which one it is, but we have Slack channels for each of the repositories. So there's a Talawa Slack channel, there's a Talawa API Slack channel, so you'll see that here. Here's our Talawa Slack channel that we use. There's a Talawa admin Slack channel. Then there's a Talawa docs channel, and then we have the Talawa API channel as well. So please go to all of those channels when you're looking for assistance, talk to people. There's many, many resources there. And then also, you will notice that we also have channels with a -GitHub at the end. And so these channels are automatically subscribed to our pull requests and issues. And so if you subscribe to these, you will see what pull requests are created, what new issues are created, and you can ask to be assigned to some of these issues on an as-needed basis. All right, so let's just talk about some of these other things that I would like you to be aware of. And so this is the issues page of the Talawa repository. All the repositories have the same sort of information at the very top. There's a link to student internship programs, and there's a link as a pinned issue to the etiquette that we want to try and have. And so if you click on the student internship programs link, you will see just some general guidance as to what we're trying to achieve. We are trying to give priority to bug, test, and CI/CD GitHub actions type issues, because these are the things that will help with our reliability overall. And issues related to new features, etc., will be given less of a priority. So instead of some of these things being reviewed within a 24-hour period or less, some of these other ones that are less a priority may fall by the wayside, depending upon the amount of pull requests that are in the queue at the moment. So at the moment, there are not that many pull requests in the queue. So as a result of that, we may be able to help out a little faster than normal. So read this page. Try to get yourself assigned issues. Make sure that when you are doing pull requests that you are assigned the issue for the pull request. If your pull request doesn't have an issue that's listed there, or you're not assigned to the issue, that pull request will be closed. We are really trying to create some amount of process in the way that we handle things. Last year when we got the Google Summer of Code, it was really a circus, and we are really trying to see how we can get some more just basic discipline in the whole approval process and the creation of issues, etc. So read this information as much as you can, and I think that will be helpful. So the last thing that I want to show everybody is our links to the code coverage. And so if you go to each of the repositories, if you just scroll down at the top of the README is a link to the code coverage page. So if you just click on this, you will see information. And as this comes up, you will see that this is the Talawa code coverage numbers, and you can see that they're gradually going up. If you're not familiar with using code coverage, just in general, and the whole question of manipulating and understanding how to use the lcov.info file, I suggest that you just take a quick look at it. It's not that difficult. And so on each of these pages, once again, we're looking at this link on the README file. You can see right here, there's a link, and you go over here to get the code coverage. You'll see this thing. It looks like a sunburst, and it really is. And so I want to show you some stuff. So as you can see here, you'll see down here, you'll see I was pointing at one of our files. And so that's lib custom painters language icon.dart. And I want to leave this here just so that you can see the relationship. So look at this line while I move across the starburst. So at the beginning, you can see that I'm in the / directory, then there's a /lib, then the /lib custom painters, and then the WhatsApp logo.dart. That file, because it's nice and light green, that file has 100% code coverage. And so you can look at some of these, the most external rays of the starburst and see that the names of the files are changing, and you can get an idea as to what the code coverage levels are. And so this is a visual representation, but don't be worried. If you scroll a little bit further down, you will see that there's a link to the lib directory. Then let's just go to the view models. We can click on the view models. Then there's the after auth view models. And you can see, let's just take a look. Maybe this, let me go a little further up because let's go to the after auth. That might work. Yeah, excuse me, I had most of this pre-planned, but I really want to make sure that we have good information that works well. Just give me a second. All right, let's just take a look at this one, because this one is going to be very clear. So this is the lib view model main screen view model.dart file. And as you scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll see green sections, which mean that all of these sections have been covered with tests. And there are red sections, which show these sections have not been covered by tests. And so you have a rough idea as to where to look in terms of the testing. So here's some green, and here's some more red. And so you can use this information to determine what areas need more attention and what areas don't. There are a number of participants in the various channels on our Slack channel that you can ask questions like, how can I get a report on the coverage of the file that I'm currently working on? Those sorts of questions. Please feel free to ask them there. I don't have all the information because I'm going to open it up to chat in general in a couple of minutes, but I think that would be very useful for all of you. All right, so I'm going to go back to the Slack, to the Meet, and I'm going to open it up for general questions. So I'm going to stop presenting, and let's start talking. Any of you have any questions related to what I've said?
Yeah, I'm Aman. I have a little bit doubt. Actually, I have created a pull request earlier in the Talawa API. And what the issue I am getting there is, as you said, code coverage. I have done the logical part, the bug which needs to be fixed, but I can't cover the test cases and the code coverage. And I searched on Google, but I couldn't find any relevant document or any tutorial which teaches us how we can improve the code coverage. So I really need help with this code coverage thing. I also asked in Slack group with the mentors, but I didn't get a solution yet. So if you can share any documentation or any reference to learn to how to write test cases, then it will be very much helpful.
Okay, that's a very good question. There are a number of people in our Slack channels that have been working on this over and over again. So there's a guy, two people based in India. So I'm assuming, Amanda, you're based in India. One of them is Sandeep Valsani. He has been working on code coverage issues specifically for the API for a number of weeks, most recently. And there's Sumitra as well that you can also contact as well through either the API or directly on Slack. And so that is specifically for the API. Anybody else who may have questions on that, you can talk to those guys. And if required, then we can open up a separate pull request just to update the documentation that we have. But I think that would be a good starting point for you. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That.
All right. Is there anybody else? You can also use the chat channel to the chat here as well to discuss anything that you may have. Any other questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question. Like when writing a proposal, do we need to write the code samples, or many of us don't have the knowledge to write backend code? So we have to literally write the code of the backend and then show how it works, or just an idea should suffice.
I think if you don't know the backend code, and say for example you're writing Talawa, you're writing a proposal specifically for Talawa, and you want to make references to the backend code. I think it would be suitable for you to be using things like some sort of schematics or some pseudocode, like what many people would do in many cases, just so that we get a better understanding as to what you're thinking about in terms of getting that done. Some of the front-end proposals may require some back-end work as well. And we fully understand that some people may have to learn a little bit of the back-end in order to get some of their front-end proposals working. And so write some stuff related to the pseudocode, as I mentioned, while you get yourself up to speed on the back-end stuff if required. Okay?
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a question. So, to reach out to mentors, we can directly them on Slack, or first you have to mail with a mentor.
Okay, so your audio is very bad. Could you just type it in the chat so so I can answer the question? Is that okay?
He is asking that should we mail the mentors first, or should we DM them? That is.
Oh, should you email them or contact them directly? The mentors are going to be on the Slack channels, so try to contact them through Slack first, because that would be more interactive. And then if you don't get any responses there, then consider using the mailing list that we have there. I'm going to be updating the mailing lists right after this call, so that to make sure that the current set of mentors will all see the questions that you have and also see the proposals that you have ahead of time. But try to contact them directly. And once again, if they don't respond, ask them for another mentor, or then use the email. One of the mentors will get back to you fairly quickly. I monitor that mentor email list, and at the end of the day, I try to see if anybody else has responded to the questions. I have a rough idea. I've done some work with Flutter in the past. I am not an expert. I can look at JavaScript and sort of understand what's going on. I can look at TypeScript and get a basic idea. So asking me directly is not going to be generally a good idea, but asking the mentors directly would be very helpful. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I would like one tip from you. Actually, the student applications are going to start from next month. So we have 1 month in hand. So should we create pull request and resolve the current issues rather than focusing on the proposals from now. Or first we can resolve some bug, make some good pull requests, and after that we can focus on our proposals and those idea list kind of thing when the application comes for the students. So what tips should you give, that first we will focus on that proposal part, or should we focus on the pull request and the issues part and understand the code base first with a good manner?
I think it's going to be a combination of the two. There are issues in the queues that are relatively easy to do, that don't require a great deal of research to get done. And we created the test issues for two reasons. One of them is to make sure that the code gets more stable. But what we noticed last year was that students would submit pull requests and issues for ideas that they had in mind. And what would happen is that other students would copy those pull requests and then do pull requests for the same pull request on the same issue. And it became very, very complicated. And so the fact that we have tests is a partial protection to potential applicants. And so therefore, if you don't necessarily want to reveal everything about your idea, doing the pull requests about the tests would be a way to protect some of your, I guess you could call it intellectual property and some of your ideas. I would suggest, like for the proposals, as with everything, start working on a skeleton for the proposal, and then work on some of the issues to start with, and then as time goes by, add more and more to the proposal. Most of the proposals that we received have been somewhere in the region of 3 to 10 pages. It really depends. Many times the proposals get big because there are images in there, so don't take that as being an absolute. And so I think that will provide you with benefit of general ideas to what we're trying to achieve. All right. So do we consider rebasing the commits?
Okay. So the proposal.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Like I was asking that it is good not to have a very long proposal. Like if the proposal consists of 3 to 4 pages, then it is good that it is readable also for the mentors.
3 pages is probably too short, because what is going to happen is the first page is going to be usually somebody saying, my name is, for in your case, my name is Aman Kumar. I do this sort of work. These are the types of things that I do. Here's my icon. And then the first page is just the introduction. And usually the last page has some sort of information that's related to conclusion. And then there's just 1 page in the middle. So 3 pages really is not going to be good enough. Most of the proposals that I can think of were usually close to 10 or maybe over 10 pages, because they were so illustrative of what they were trying to achieve. Okay? All right, so let me go to the chat.
Yeah.
There's Noman Khan who's asked a question here, so let me just ask that. Do we consider rebasing the commits while creating a PR, or is it fine without rebasing? Is that like rebasing specifically for linting, or just rebasing in general? No man, let me know. In general, okay. If you think rebasing will make things easier and better in the future, think about doing that. I think that would be useful for us. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of repeated code in some of the various parts of the code base. So anything that can improve the readability, anything that can improve the flow would be great. But make sure that rebasing doesn't cause you to lose so much time that the underlying work isn't completed. So there needs to be a balance, but I am very partial towards seeing code that is readable, that flows well, that shows that people have taken the time to understand the way things operate. So It's a balance once again. Almost all my answers are going to say it's a balance, but rebasing is always something that we always need to consider. Okay, but it requires a force push. Why would it require a force? I am not getting the reason for the force push. So for example, I think I see what's going on here. So for example, you have code and and a new pull request has gone through, and all of a sudden now you need to merge those commits, the previous commits, into your code base. Yes, you would have to do that. Quite often there may be conflicts. There have been cases in which people have been doing pull requests and dozens of files are included, which don't seem right. So I think making sure that you merge your code with the existing pull requests is good. If I haven't answered your question, please get in contact with a mentor. They may have more information about the specifics of your question. Okay.
I had a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I was looking into the Talawa admin GitHub. So in the issues panel, there were many good first issues as you mentioned, but they are tagged as unapproved. What does that mean?
There are what? Come again?
They are tagged as good first issue .1, then
yes.
Unapproved. So what does that mean?
Oh, I see what you're saying, that it says unapproved. Yeah, that can be confusing. Okay, so let me explain. Let me explain what that means. And this is a result of Google Summer of Code from last year. We had students and potential persons submitting issues and then creating pull requests immediately saying, please, review my pull request and merge it into the code base. And nobody had looked at the issue. None of the mentors had looked at the issues or anything. And so we didn't have context. And as a result of that, we decided that automatically, whenever a new issue is created, we would add the tag unapproved. And so therefore, in order for you to be assigned the issue, you would have to be assigned it yourself. A mentor or a contributor in the repositories would have to assign you the issue, and then remove the unapproved tag. It was a methodology to try and make sure that we didn't have the wild west and the cowboy attitude.
We have to comment on that project that please assign.
Yeah. So if you have the issue, comment on it, say please assign it to me, and then when it's assigned to you, make sure that the unapproved tag is removed. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have Akshat is enhancing API
Victor,
performance. Go ahead, Sagar.
Yeah, just to add on top of that, ask for at least not more than 2 issues to assign to you. Focus on 1 or 2 issues, fix that, and then ask for another issue to assign. Otherwise, you will keep on asking to assign the issues, and will forget the older issues. That will create backlog issues. Yeah, that's the solution.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really important. And one of the reasons why we are trying to enforce only having people work on 2 issues at a time in the repos is because one of the things that we discovered last year was that people would ask to be assigned all the issues. So we had people that were assigned maybe 10, 20 issues. And if anybody else said, hey, I'd like to work on this issue, they'd say, no, you can't work on this issue because I'm working on it already. And so that automatically made other people not have the ability or to work on issues. And so we're trying to make sure that you work on 2 issues at a time for fairness. We want everybody to get a chance. All right. So when we say you may see some of the contributors saying, hey, you've been working on too many issues right now. Please wait. That's the reason why we want to make it fair for everybody. All right, so we have a question here from Akshat. Is enhancing API performance a project the organization is expecting this year? we would like to improve the API performance. I think there's a API performance issue. I think there's related to what is it again? It's related to data loaders for the API.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, there is an idea which is listed on the Talawa website, which asks us to solve the n+1 query problem, which is basically a GraphQL problem. So I was just confirming whether it's a project that we are expecting this year or not, because as you listed a number of ideas, most of them were related to adding some new feature
Right.
to the application and not enhancing the performance, because these are two separate things, and enhancing will create some complexity in the code base.
Yes.
So that's I was asking whether it's required to add the features first, or are we starting to enhance the API as of from this year?
Okay, yeah, we want to make sure the n+1 issue with data loaders for APIs in GraphQL is a well-known problem. And we would like to make sure that that does not affect the performance of the API. We have had people in the past shortlisted for that particular idea, and they decide to go with other organizations. But just to let you know that is something that we would like to see. Many times people, because the performance issue that we're talking about impacts almost everything else. It impacts all the features, like all the events. It affects to some extent the plugins, etc. So yes, we would like to do that. You will notice that most of the ideas that we have in the ideas list don't really have a lot of dependencies. They're not dependent on some other idea to be implemented. And so I think the performance one would be one of them. If you can implement it as transparently as possible, so that, for example, there's no need to modify anything in Talawa itself or the Talawa admin, that would be very useful. But we are very, very, very aware of that. So Sagar has his hand raised. Sagar is one of our mentors. He's based in India. So Sagar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so general tips I just want to share. We will look for good quality contributions, not the number of peers. So even if you have the 5 peers contribution before even GSoC application start, that is good. If you are contributing for quality issues, and if you have the dozens of peers but some minor fixes, that will not make your application good. So that's one point. One more thing is, someone asked if we should start writing the proposals from now on. Actually, we can't say anything because it's totally depend on how many slots we get from the GSoC. Once we get the number of slots, we'll decide which ideas we need to focus on for this year, and then we'll decide which one to take. So if you start writing the proposals from now on and that idea we are not considering, then that will be huge loss for you. So I'll suggest to contribute for the project irrespective of the idea. You can consider 2-3 ideas, try to understand the project, try to contribute more and more, and then once the application process starts, you will have a good amount of time. Then you can start writing your proposals and then forming your code base to submit for the proposal. That will improve your chances to get selected for the GSoC.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that specifically, just building on what Sagar has to say. We have had debates amongst the mentors, specifically for persons who have submitted pull requests that are of low quality, that don't really prove the person has knowledge of the code base. And we've had lots and lots of debates going back and forth about quality. And so if you don't want to have a debate about your proposal, make sure about that. Make sure that you have a good quality pull request. You'll have a much better chance. Okay. Is there a good number for PR? Is there any number? Generally speaking, no. It's really about the quality as much as we can look at it. If generally speaking, one or two pull requests usually isn't enough for us to come to a conclusion, and so a relatively reasonable amount would be good. Something that will show. I would suggest that you look at ideas, or not so much ideas, but issues that show that you understand different sections of the code base. So, for example, if you're doing Talawa, for example, and for example, you're doing tests, I would suggest that you look at some tests for widgets, then some tests for view models, and some tests for views, and then maybe even start looking at tests for services that have not been specifically requested. So that could be something as well. Similarly, for the API, look at the various resolvers. Look at resolvers in terms of tests for the for organizations, for users, for different sections of the code base to show that you're exercising knowledge of those different areas. I think that would be useful in general. Okay. So, Aman, I think you had a question again.
Yeah, I have one last question. Like as Sagar said now that more focusing on instead of focusing on the proposal part, we should focus on contributing. So let's say if I go to the idea list and I have an idea and I can implement that feature right now, like that idea needs to be implemented isn't too big. It's a small thing which can be implemented now before being selected in GSoC. So if there is no issue created previously and I want to add that feature, then how can I add that feature? If I can add that feature today, if I can code it and add that feature, but from previously there are no issues for that idea and I want to add on it. So what should I create first a issue upon that idea that I want to add this idea, and after that submit my code, or should I wait for getting selected until GSoC to
So if you have an idea, if you have a way in which you could get one of those ideas completed before the completion of GSoC, but go ahead. That'd be fantastic for us, and that would show a commitment to what you're trying to do. And then if there's something else that you want to apply to for GSoC, in addition to that, for some other idea, then feel free to do that. I would suggest that when you're doing it, to keep in mind that you don't want to have a great amount of time between the creation of the issue and the pull request, because we have seen in the past where people will duplicate pull requests and claim it as their own. We try to take that into consideration. We try to make sure that people aren't doing duplicate issues, etc. I would suggest that you keep an eye out and subscribe to those various channels for the various issues in Slack, just to make sure that you yourself are being protected from something like that. But if you feel that you can complete one of the ideas fairly quickly based on your knowledge, go ahead and then think of something else. We commend you for that. That would be very useful, and that'd be well regarded from us. The code base is relatively young. We want to try and see how we can accelerate us getting to some sort of an alpha product by the end of the summer, possibly even doing a cloud thing, or maybe we're not 100% sure. But the faster we can get to that goal, the better. So if you can see that, that would be very useful and well received. Okay. Any other questions before we go?
I want to add on top of that. Okay, if it's good if you can complete enough idea before application process starts, or even before getting selected. That will give us assurity that you can work on that project, Talawa admin API or Talawa. Yes, and we are looking for that assurity. you understand the code base, you can work and complete the features during the GSoC. That will be good. But then make sure you at least you enhance that idea during the GSoC, or you work on the same project and apply for the idea, submit your proposals for the same project. Otherwise, if you submit the PR or the PR for the Talawa project, and if you're submitting the proposal for the Talawa admin, that will reduce your chances, because that will not give us a clarity if you're good on the Talawa admin or the Talawa. So make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So I would just like what what Sagar was saying. Yeah, if you're going to be doing stuff, don't try to focus on one of the repos in general, so that you don't spread yourself too thin, so that we can see that we can evaluate you on the code base and not on one code base rather than multiple code bases. Try, if you can, if you feel that there's a need to increase the features of the idea that you've already submitted PRs for, and that you think that would be a useful expansion or extension, that would be good. If you feel that what you've done already is sufficient and you want to do something more, make sure that it's in the same code base as well. I think that would be helpful.
Hi Peter, there's one question from my end, it's Chetan.
Hi.
Yeah, so actually I was going through the Git link for our project. So over there in the first issues, along with the labels, I'm seeing some score has been associated with every bug that is there. So in our evaluation about our proposal, will that impact our proposal? Like with the amount of fixes that we have done? So, or like means how would that impact our project?
Yeah, so yes, that's a very good question. How do the points work? The points, we assigned points to try and give people an idea as to the relative weights of the various types of issues in terms of what we think are meaningful types of, if you did pull requests related to the various activities. But we also take into consideration the number of pull requests and the quality of the code. Whether the code works, whether the idea behind it is a good one, and so those things are taken into consideration. We have had situations in the past where prior participants have done a lot of relatively low quality types of pull requests, like I've mentioned before, doing minor UI UX modifications, and we've looked at that and said, well, this person probably wouldn't be able to handle the type of stuff that we're working on. So if you're going to be working on tests, try as much as possible to do tests in different areas of the code base, so that would be useful for you guys. And then if you think you have a feature, also add it in there. Highlight the fact that you've added a feature and say, look, you think that this is really meaningful and that you'd like to have this given additional consideration. There's no hard and fast rule for what we're trying to do, but generally speaking, the slightly harder issues and the more of them that you do, the more likely that you're going to get our attention, but then also the quality of the presentation is also going to be important, the quality of your proposal. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, Brandon, please go ahead.
Where did you say we could go to access the actual application?
Yeah, so if you go for the Calico challenge, if you go to palisadoes.org/Calico, there's near the bottom of the page, there's a link to a Word document for the application. If you're doing Google Summer of Code, it's more of a free form presentation format. Some people give us stuff that's a PowerPoint presentation. Some people give us more formal presentation with using like a Microsoft Word PDF version, and they submit that through the Google Summer of Code page that they have. So if you're interested in applying to the Google Summer of Code, go to the Google Summer of Code website, register yourself as a potential participant, and read all of that information, and then you get more information there as well. So Brandon, you said that you had a question, but because you came late, is there any questions that I could go over for your benefit? Okay, what is the app about? I see. Okay. The Talawa mobile app is a mobile app that is a social media app for nonprofit organizations. And what that does is that it provides the organization with a news feed for its membership. It provides them with calendaring, provides them with scheduling of events. It allows people to check in and register for events. It also has a way of creating group chats for the various people. The group chats can be tied to the event. So, for example, if you have a church and you have a choir practice that's on a regular basis and you use that as an event, everybody who's invited to choir practice would be automatically tied into a group chat, and they could talk with one another and get things done. The events also have, unlike Google Calendar, the events allow people to be assigned roles and responsibilities, and there's a reason for this. Say, for example, you have a wedding. There may be somebody who's been invited who you want to be the person handling the car for the bride. You may want to have somebody's handling the flowers, somebody's handling the food, somebody's handling the drinks, pastries, somebody who's handling the relationships with the various in-laws and relatives. And so if anybody is looking to see who's responsible for what, they can look at the event itself and say, oh, I see who's working on these things. And so you have a much more organized type of activity. And so the way it works is that there's a master organization, and then you can have sub-organizations. So I had mentioned in the past like a cricket federation, but you could also think of something like any sort of a club. There could be a national club, and the club could have a league, and there could be clubs in the league that are sub-members or sub-organizations, and people in the organization could be members of multiple of these sub-organizations for various reasons. There could be a coach who handles multiple organizations and wants to be on both and wants to check in on both of the multiple clubs, etc. And so that's what the app does. And we're trying to see how we can create an app that can be cloud enabled by the end of summer. We tried to do that last summer, but we weren't quite there. We'd like to be able to have a proof of concept demonstration for people that can show them exactly what we want to achieve. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope that answered your question. All right, great. Anybody else? Okay, Chetan, once again.
Yes. Actually, I do have one query over here that when we're creating an event in a app, so is it possible to create sub-event associated with that? Can we link some small task and some small group chats that will be created with the main event that is happening? So is it possible?
Yeah, so the way that it works is that we want to have the event having chats automatic, and then that we can create tasks that are assigned to people who are invited to the events. We don't have sub-events just yet. We would like to get the basic core features working prior to doing that. So things like reserving the location, creating the locations ahead of time would be something good as well. Possibly we could have something with sub-events later in future. But like I said, we want to get some of the core functionalities there. If you think that you can do all of that, plus have sub-events, and not just have sub-events, but make it easy for people to understand that sub-events are there, that could be useful. But generally speaking, most people just want to have a single event. It's not as if we're trying to be like a project management of like a heavyweight project management piece of software with various types of dependencies and prerequisites, etc. We just want it to be something that would be really simple for a small non-profit organization to be able to handle, as well as the members of that small non-profit organization. So anything that you can think of that will make it easier to handle the events, in terms of possibly the layout of some of the things, the way events are handled, some of the logic or the flow of the UI UX may not necessarily be ideal. You may want to add new features, those sorts of things. Take that into consideration. Okay? All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I was, yeah, I do have one more query.
Okay.
Like we talked about, the draft proposals and we're supposed to mail them. So is there any internal deadline for the draft proposals? Because I am aware about that there's a final deadline for a proposal to submit for GSoC.
Right.
But for an internal review, is there any deadline or something?
We don't really have a deadline, but I would suggest to you that you start getting involved with the mentors sooner rather than later, so that you can get their attention. We probably should have a deadline for some of those things, but the way things are, we've had people submit to the draft proposals stuff ahead of time. Usually people have a relationship with their mentors ahead of time using Slack, and so they can get a rough idea as to what that would be. But yeah, I would send stuff to the draft proposals just in case, as a backup measure. And like I said, give yourself enough time that somebody can take a look at it in anticipation. Okay? All right, no more questions. I hope this has been useful to all of you. Okay, Mark Anthony, please go ahead.
Sorry about that. I texted in the chat, but let me just say, I'm interested based on the application that you spoke about, the social media for nonprofits.
Right.
Just want to know what format is for the proposal, as in what is it, just a write-up, how I write it up, and then do I submit it to a mentor on the team or to the GSoC portal or something? I'm not fully sure.
Yeah, right. So if you have, if you go to the GSoC web page that I showed you earlier, there's information as to how to do all of that. Generally speaking, there's a template. If you look at the video that I'm going to be posting on YouTube sometime, maybe later tonight, you will see information about the various the templates that you can use for your GSoC application. It's not a Word template, it's just a generic template that you can use, and it gives you ideas of the things that we're going to be considering. There's information on the GSoC page that we have for Talawa, which talks about some of the selection criteria that we're going to be using. And so keep that sort of stuff in mind. Make sure that you have some sort of pseudocode in your application. Make sure that you have some diagrams. Focus on making sure that you understand not just what you're trying to do, but how you're going to do it. And so, for example, just to say that I'm going to create a new chat functionality that will do all of these things, but you need to talk about how, what package you're going to be using, why you chose that package and not some other package. Is the package something that has good long-term viability, that you don't find yourself using it and then it goes away all of a sudden? Think of other types of things that could be showstoppers in future, and take all of those things into consideration when you're working on it. Generally speaking, the quality of the applications is usually very high. The people clearly have spent some amount of time trying to figure out what they would like to see or what would like to do. But if you follow those general guidelines, as much as possible, leave most stones unturned. And I'm not saying I leave all stones unturned. Make sure that all the most important factors have been considered in your application. And I think that will be very good for you in general. All right, and that will go for both the Calico and the Google Summer of Code stuff as well. Generally speaking, try to use the Slack channel as much as you can to get the information that you need. There are lots and lots of people there. Go through the various issues and feel free to get in contact with people on the Slack channel. They will be more than willing to help you if you find yourself not being able to get things done. We've most recently in the code base, we've created new installers for the API and for the Talawa admin and improved the documentation. If that doesn't work for you, then immediately create an issue to say, boy, this doesn't work, and maybe possibly even spend some time to try and figure out how to make it work, and then that could be an issue or pull request that you could work on. They should work, but you never know. All right? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. This section will be added to the previous session that we had earlier today, and the combined presentation will be posted on YouTube. All right, well, thank you very much, and good luck.